In this video, we're breaking down 4 powerful chess traps that can surprise your opponent and lead to fast, decisive wins, even against strong players. Let's get started. Trap number 4 is called the Halosar Trap, a brilliant 9-move checkmate that features a shocking queen sacrifice and a very creative final idea. You start with pawn to e4, and black responds with pawn to d5, entering the Scandinavian defense. Instead of playing normally, you go for pawn to d4, stepping into the aggressive Black-Mardimer gambit and offering your e4 pawn with attacking intentions. As the pawn is now under pressure, you develop naturally with knight to c3, attacking it again. Black usually defends their extra pawn with knight to f6, not wanting to give it back so easily. Now you continue with the typical gambit idea, pawn to f3, putting even more pressure on the center and preparing to recapture. Black accepts and captures on f3, trying to hold on to their material advantage. In most games, players would recapture with the knight, but here comes the twist. In the Halosar Trap, you play queen takes on f3 instead, entering the dangerous Ritter gambit. This move increases your attacking potential, even though it allows black to take another pawn. Black will often grab the pawn on d4, thinking they are simply winning material. At this point, you are down 2 pawns, but your pieces are far more active and ready to attack. You continue with bishop to e3, developing smoothly while attacking black's queen. In response, black commonly moves the queen to b4, targeting your pawn on b2 and trying to create counterplay. Now comes a very important move. You castle queenside. This not only keeps your king safe, but also defends the b2 pawn and brings your rook into the game on the open d-file, setting up future tactics. However, black may believe you've made a mistake and play bishop to g4. At first glance, this looks very dangerous. Your queen and rook are aligned, and it seems like you're about to lose material due to a skewer. It appears you must move your queen and give up your rook. But instead of defending, you strike with the brilliant move knight to b5. This quiet-looking move is actually the key to the entire trap. If black greedily captures your queen, which is the most natural reaction, you immediately deliver checkmate with knight takes on c7. The king has no escape, your rook cuts off critical squares, and the game ends instantly in a stunning fashion. Trap number 3 is the Vienna Trap, arising after pawn to e4, pawn to e5, and knight to c3, the Vienna opening. This opening is full of tricky ideas and hidden tactics, making it a great practical weapon. Among all its traps, this one stands out for its elegant pattern that ultimately wins the queen. Black continues with knight to f6, a natural developing move. Now you strike with pawn to f4, the Vienna gambit. This gambit is especially dangerous because it doesn't feel like a typical sacrifice. If black captures the pawn, which most players do, you immediately respond with pawn to e5, attacking the knight and seizing space. Now think about it. Where can that knight go? Many squares are controlled by your pieces. Your knight takes away key central squares and your queen covers others. In reality, the knight has almost no good options, and the only safe retreat is back to g8, which is a very passive move that leaves black cramped. Because of this, some players try queen to e7 instead, attempting to break the pin and avoid losing control. But you calmly respond with queen to e2, unpinning your pawn and maintaining the pressure. Now black is still forced to retreat the knight to g8, and their queen becomes slightly exposed. You continue with knight to f3, developing a piece while also preventing any annoying queen to h4 check ideas. Black often plays pawn to d6 here, trying to challenge your strong pawn and open up the position. Now comes the key moment. You play knight to d5. This powerful move hits the queen and creates a serious threat against the c7 pawn. Black must respond carefully. If they move the queen to e6, you simply play knight takes on c7 with check, forking the king and queen and winning material immediately. However, most players will notice this and instead retreat their queen to d8, thinking everything is safe and protected. But here comes the brilliant idea. You play knight takes on c7 anyway. This stunning move once again creates a fork on the king and queen. Black is practically forced to capture your knight. Otherwise, the damage is too great. But after they do, you follow up with queen takes on d6. This move is devastating. It comes with a discovered check, attacks the queen, and controls key squares so black cannot properly defend. No matter what they try, they are going to lose their queen or suffer a completely lost position. Even their best attempt, such as bishop to e7, doesn't help. You simply capture and remain far ahead in material. From here, the position is completely winning, and black has no real counterplay left. Trap number 2 is the Damiano Trap, one of the fastest and most punishing traps you can face in the opening. You begin with pawn to e4, and black replies with pawn to e5. Then you play knight to f3, immediately attacking the pawn on e5. In most games, black will defend properly with knight to c6 or pawn to d6. However, beginners sometimes play the very weak move pawn to f6, trying to protect the e5 pawn with another pawn. This move looks logical at first glance, but it creates serious weaknesses, especially around black's king. Now comes the key idea. You play the stunning sacrifice knight takes on e5. It may look crazy to give up a knight so early, but this move is already winning due to the tactical weaknesses in black's position. In most cases, black will accept the sacrifice with pawn takes on e5, thinking they are simply gaining material. But this is where everything falls apart. You immediately respond with queen to h5 check. This move is incredibly strong. It not only checks the king, but also targets the weak pawn on e5, which is now pinned and vulnerable. From here, black is already in serious trouble. One common attempt is pawn to g6, trying to block the check. But this fails instantly to queen takes on e5. Now you are attacking both the king and the rook at the same time, a clean fork. Black cannot defend both, and you will win a rook with ease. Even if they try to create complications, you stay safe and remain completely winning. Another try is king to e7, stepping out of the check. But this doesn't solve the problem either. You simply play queen takes on e5 again, keeping the attack alive. Black's only move is usually king to f7, and now you continue with bishop to c4 check. At this point, black's position is collapsing. The king is exposed, your pieces are active, and there is no good way to defend against the incoming threats. Whether it leads to immediate checkmate or massive material loss, the game is essentially over. This trap is a perfect example of how one careless pawn move in the opening can lead to a quick and decisive punishment. Let me show you a clear example of how this attack works if black plays king to g6. This line leads to a forced and clean checkmate. You start with queen to f5 check, putting immediate pressure on the king. Black has only one move, sliding the king over, and already their position becomes very cramped. Now you play pawn to h4, a key move that stops black from ever playing pawn to g5, since you would simply capture and open more lines. Most players respond with pawn to g6, trying to attack your queen. But instead of retreating, you strike with pawn to d4. This opens your bishop's diagonal and delivers a powerful discovered check. Black is now in serious trouble. If they try pawn to g5, you capture it, creating a double check from your rook and pawn. The king is forced to move, and then you finish the game with queen to f7. Checkmate. Now let's move on to trap number 1, the classic legal trap. This is a well-known 8-move checkmate that is both elegant and highly effective. The game begins with pawn to e4, pawn to e5, knight to f3, and pawn to d6. You continue with knight to c3, black develops with knight to c6, then you play bishop to c4, and black responds with bishop to g4. Now you play pawn to h3, attacking the bishop and asking it a question. If black retreats with bishop to h5, you spring the trap with the surprising move knight takes on e5. If black gets greedy and captures your queen, you unleash a beautiful combination. Bishop takes on f7 check, the king is forced forward, and then knight to d5 delivers checkmate. It's a stunning finish, where all your pieces coordinate perfectly to control every square around the king.